I am here today with a very dear friend. One of I don't call people best friends, but I would consider you one of my best
Oh,
friends.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Annalisa Bond, for those that are listening and want a full name, is here with me today. And I am so grateful to be walking this path with you. And I'm so grateful for this conversation to share with other people. The two of us shoot the shit and dive into some really rich conversations around empathy, around trust, and around wants, needs, shoulds, have tos, and so many other things. But I'm really excited, as I am in every episode, to have you here. But that excitement expands beyond just my excitement to have people hear you in this podcast. My excitement expands into the impact that what we talk about in this episode will have on people's lives. So I'm excited for them to dive in. I'm excited for you to dive in. And for you to take whatever nuggets land, the ahas, that the light bulbs that go off. I'm excited for you to have an experience in this podcast and to see where it takes you. And I'm excited for Annalisa and I to be done this podcast so we can now shoot the shit about more.
Well, thanks for having me. This is fun.
It's fun, right? Only because I'm
little
nervous
odd.
and you're not.
Well, I'm kind of, I could be nervous quite easily because I have no clue what we're doing really or
Yeah.
what to expect. And so it's just like, okay, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's what I often think about the conversations we have, and that's what I would love to record, you know? Like, that's what I want to invite people into, is these deeper conversations we have that aren't your everyday average conversation. And yeah, I haven't found a way to do it where I just totally relax into the conversation without knowing I'm being recorded.
About that.
Yeah.
Hello, we know you're there.
And it's so interesting. Like, I'm going to just slide into this podcast without introducing you and first talk about this, and then I'll introduce you. But yeah, it's so interesting how as soon as I'm recorded, there's a shift. And I've talked about it before on the podcast, and we've joked around. I did a whole episode on freeze with a number of my clients that I've worked with for a number of years. And at the end of it, we ended the recording and everyone relaxed. And we're like, now we can like shoot the shit again. And it's like, why? What is it for me that, really, practice, I'm sure. But yeah, it's so interesting. And for me, I think part of it is entangled in my deep-seated history around being seen. Not just this lifetime, but past lifetimes, which we've talked about before, of like the vulnerability or the riskiness that comes with being seen, and how much more comfortable it is for me to stay small. And it's in the podcast where I'm really playing in that edge of like, ugh, I might be seen. Even though a big part of me is totally fine with that. There's this part that just gets really protective around the idea of being seen.
I wonder what parts it's protecting.
Yeah.
Like what's okay to be seen and what feels more vulnerable to be seen.
Yeah. For me, yeah. There's being seen, like just that question alone, and that we talked about this a little bit yesterday. For me, like if I think about who I am as a person, and I don't mind being seen, I don't mind being out there and outrageous and like fun and charismatic, but there's something in, I think that there's something in being seen and not knowing, like in my knowledge, but being perceived as like, oh, you actually don't really know. Like there's something in that vulnerability or the perception around that feels that's entangled with what feels risky. Yeah.
Like that you're being perceived as an imposter?
I guess.
On some level.
On some level, yeah. Because there's some imposter syndrome, but that doesn't, it's like a deep-seated imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Or perhaps, a time where your deep knowing or your depth of knowing was punished. And not just in a like growing up shame way.
Yeah,
but
in like
there
an
was
ostracization, outcast,
death. Or
yeah, probably many times over. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So it's a big piece for me. And it's funny that I've chosen not to do the podcast because the podcast feels so good, but I've chosen to be in more of a guide teacher role where I have to share knowledge to be in that role. And when you look at my astrology chart, I actually the other day I did an astrology chart, a Vedic astrology chart reading with someone, and he knows nothing about me. He's in France somewhere. He's got like a 6-month waiting list and came highly recommended. And everything in it is like, you're a teacher, you're a teacher, you're a teacher, you're a teacher. And like, you're creating methods. You're teaching these methods to a lot of people and changing lives and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah.
Isn't that what you're doing?
Yeah. But this one piece. So if anyone has suggestions, feel free to reach out on how to explore it. Because I've explored it from so many different angles.
And I wonder what's entangled with, you use the word knowledge a lot, like you have to defend having knowledge, and how that's entangled with teaching in what you're just so naturally doing all the time.
Yeah, it's a good point. Because for me, I don't want to teach. I want to invite people to expand their own perspective and understanding of their own reality.
Yeah.
And to me, yes, there's teaching in it, but it's more passing the baton into other people's hands of like, who are you? Do some exploration, and here are some ways you can do that. So I think I do have this entanglement around what it means to teach and what knowledge is. That kind of keeps me
because it's not even in your
safety.
Philosophy.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Like if I look at what my philosophy is rooted in, it's rooted in the invitational language, and it's rooted in curiosity. It's rooted in play and having grace for the human experience. It's not in the old school structured learning knowledge base.
And why not?
Because that feels too boxy. Yeah, it feels too...
And you've had the experience of both?
I think that's where a bit of my protest defensive energy shows up, is if someone tells me what something is or tells me what to do, or if I hear other people, like this is a big thing for me on social media, if I hear other people telling people what the answer is, or here's the step-by-step process, or like I'm the expert and here's what you need to know, I get really worked up because that doesn't meet my values, it doesn't meet my philosophy, it doesn't meet what I want to invite people into discovering within themselves. Because I feel like we live in a world where we're so disconnected from our own experiences, and we're in more of this robot mode, and tuning into our own experiences, tuning into other people's experiences isn't available for a lot of people. But I believe it's available for all of us. We just have to learn how to tune in like that. So the more people are being told what to do, it's not giving them their own agency to discover within themselves.
Yeah. And so, that's that equates to the frustration.
Totally.
Of almost handcuffing or keeping people limited, or there's another word that wanted to come through. It's gone. But the frustration is with that because it limits what's possible.
Yeah.
And keeps people from their own experience.
Yeah.
And
yet it's so easy for humans to be attracted to the shiny thing. And
well, it's what's rewarded.
It's, yeah.
Or has been rewarded.
Encouraged.
It's the school system. It's how people are promoted. It's how it's changing.
Yeah.
At least I see that in the worlds that I work with and work in, but it's slow.
Yeah. And it will, and that's, I think, is something I am recognizing more and more. It's okay that it's slow. Like, it's okay that although I have this, like, frustration with humanity, there's also this, like, no, it's gonna be slow, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, in this small blip of this time of being human, it's actually just a small sliver of how much time, I mean, time is a weird thing in general, but, you know, the evolution and what that looks like is so much bigger than this lifetime.
Yeah. And my sense is that this time that we're in is going faster than it ever has.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it's challenging to keep up. Like, it's challenging for our bodies to keep up, catching up, knowing what to ground to. It's even more important to have those practices for myself anyway.
Yeah. Can you describe that more of, like, what do you mean by the body's moving slow while other things are moving fast? How do you experience that?
Well, I think our higher selves, our souls, they can move more quickly. Like, it knows.
Because they know.
Yeah. They're of it already. They're
Yeah.
in those dimensions. They're in those timelines or those realities. And the density of this body of Annalisa sometimes can't, like, it takes time, and the system, the biology, the physiology, the lifetimes of conditioning, like, all of that comes into play. And while I want it to happen faster and just to get there, wherever there is, I've had to learn that the practice of that level of compassion and grace, an allowance for my own process, because I'm still this human in this body.
Yeah. And there's a few
having
things.
This journey.
Yeah. There's a few things that stand out to me in that. One is, like, you have access to your soul and to spirit, right? You have access to what it feels like to tap into the knowledge that's there, whereas other people don't. They're so in their body, and the awareness of the depth of the human experience isn't as refined as I witness you in. And that's one thing I really admire in your wisdom. I feel like the wisdom comes from such a deep place. And I think that's why you're so good at what you do. Not that I even fully understand what you do.
I don't know what I do.
But what I witness in you is how, and we've spoken to this before, how you see the human experience, how you see humans in what they're experiencing. And some people will call that empathy, and we'll get into that in a sec, but just that ability to notice what's in the room, to notice the energy, to notice someone's vibe or someone's frequency, whatever words we want to put to it. You are able to notice it, you're sensitive to it, there's an attunement to it, and you're also able to meet the person with such care. So I don't even think it matters what you do, because no matter what you do, you bring that forward first. And that's what attracts people to working with you, or friendship with you,
right.
Community with you, and because it's safety. You hold this vibe, this frequency that really welcomes people in to their own level of that, whether they know it or not. So if they're disconnected from themselves, they still feel that, even though they're not conscious of it. That's at least what I witness when I see you with people. It's like you hold this grace that welcomes everyone to remember their own grace within them.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's part of that is my sense of myself that is there's a natural part of that I think has always been a part of being Annalisa, being me. And there's also a part that I have intentionally worked with to cultivate. I'd say specifically over the last 15 years for sure, like this sense of presence, this practice of, a really good friend of mine, we use the word harbor, like we're being the harbor, and the harbor has wakes and weather systems and different things happen in it, but like the harbors run deep, and so digging deep into that well or basin to hold whatever's going on I would call it my craft, but I would also call it a gift in the sense of what I have to offer. And I don't think about it just within a work form either, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
It became quite intentional for me when I left teaching and started doing the leadership development work. I mean, basically it's working with people. It's under the guise or the context of leadership development, but it really is, it became a commitment to do my own work to such a degree that I just kept cleaning out the space, so as little of as possible of my own guck was out of the way more and more, to really hold as clean a space as possible, or a resonant space, like so that that person can only feel themselves or has a better chance of having their own remembering occur for them in the space and the conditions that we're creating and in together.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
And what I want to invite people to even consider in what you're sharing is like who in their lives holds a similar resonance, a similar vibe where it just feels like you can show up and no matter what, they're there. Whether it's someone professional or a friend or a family member, if you're that lucky. Because usually there's way more entangled with family members. But to really reflect on what does it feel like when you're in the presence of those people, because that's just a reflection of what's also within you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it does create more space when you've made the harbor deeper. When someone's in your presence, it makes more space for them to start to see the many layers that might be entangled for them. And I feel like that's something that we can become more conscious of, is like with who or where do we experience that like harbor feeling where there's this presence where we then have more space to remember or to see the entangled pieces that are at play.
Yeah, without the judgment, without the shame.
Yeah.
Like it's almost liberating to be able to look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's at play. Oh wow," because now I can do something with that.
Yeah.
But they're finding that all out in that beautiful space.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not airy-fairy. It's very clear. It's very firm in the sense of the seriousness of the commitment that I have when I'm in that with another person.
Yeah. There's, I want to kind of weave in this empath word that a lot of people use, because I think it's an important word to weave into this, because to me what you're describing is you are an empath. And where I find people get entangled in that word is when we're sensitive to what's in the room and we're sensitive to what's going on for people.
Yeah.
It can often be rooted in survival, in like, I have to know what everyone's feeling to make sure I feel like I'm okay. That's very different, a very different quality than when you're the harbor and you're holding space and you can see what's going on for the person, but it's not like I have to pick up on these cues to make sure I'm safe. And I find those that are a little more hypervigilant or are empaths and pick up on everyone else's energy, when it's rooted in survival, there's work to be done there, but it's really the foundation of what you're speaking to. Like, the more those people that can relate with being an empath, yet do it out of a place of survival, the more they can work through their own pieces, I believe that leads to this real clear sense of, here I am with you, this presence, but I've left everything else. Either I've worked through it or I've left it on the sidelines. Yeah. And I think that ability to move into being that is like what all practitioners should look at. Personally, I think they should.
People invite them to.
I would invite them to. I think I have a little bit of about that, because I know there are many practitioners who get in their own way because of the skill they have around survival and being an empath based on survival. It really creates a beautiful skill to hold someone's experience and see the many layers and see all the energy, but it's exhausting when you do that. And I worry for practitioners or people in general. It doesn't have to be practitioners, because you're just taking on. It's not that you're taking on. I don't believe we take on people's energy, but we get entangled in the depth of the chaos more and more. So I just want to point that out, the difference between like the empath that is actually rooted in trauma and rooted in survival and rooted in like, I have to understand what's going on for people to be okay, versus how that can be refined and worked through to really be a masterful human that can hold space from a very different way.
Yeah. It's making me think about I don't know if I can relate to it being survival as much as it feels like it was an obligation. Like there was this sense of responsibility that if I could feel all of what was going on in a room, I had a responsibility to attend to all of those different needs, dramas, what have you, and that became exhausting.
Yeah.
And wasn't a healthy pattern for me. And I remember it was in 2 different Feldenkrais trainings. There was one time, I think it was in it was the first training in Victoria. I can't remember anyway. And I got up off the mat and I walked around and I watched myself like look for people to go and like check in on them. And then I pulled back and I just started bawling.
Oh, so how I would describe that is you noticed the warble, you noticed the moment where the pattern began, and there was a window of choice there where you finally discovered something else is
and I
possible.
had no idea how much that was like pulling me, not like driving me. And in that moment I was like, oh my gosh, like I started crying and I'm like, why am I upset? And then it was like, no one needs me. I'm not needed. Then, I mean, that led to a lot of exploration and discovery and work of not needing to, having the ability to be empathic and not have to engage with all of those energies or stories or narratives or needs in the room, and to put myself first in this particular scenario.
Beautiful.
I was a student, so the most important thing was for me to be learning and
Yeah.
soaking in everything I possibly could get from this experience. Yeah, so that I don't know if that fits in with what you're talking about, but it's a very stark moment. And then it was another training where I was at, and I was in such a different place of, I'm here for me. It's cost me a lot of money. I'm focusing on this. And this woman came up to me and she said, "Why don't you like me?" And I said, "What do you mean? Well, of course I like you. Why do you think I don't like you?" "Well, you never talk to me." And I said, "What do you mean?" And when we dropped into this conversation, she just felt that I wasn't trying to be her friend and I wasn't paying attention to her. And it was me years before in this drive and this motivation. But now I had such a different sense of myself and my agency and honoring how I wanted to be learning and looking after myself in this space. So that was interesting.
Just to have that mirrored back to you, to see like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And empath is an interesting empathy, being an empath. It's an interesting, everything has a light and a shadow side to it. And so being an empath, you know, what's the gift of that? And then where is the line that keeps it healthy? And it's massive. It was something massive for me to develop. When you talk about practitioners, it was something massive for me to develop as a teacher. Definitely in the client work that I do now and working with teams. And the way I would describe how I manage that now, because I mean, I still feel what's going on in the room. And I clock that, but I don't react or respond to everything that's going on. And I have something called the fence, where I believe that you are more than capable. We can get to the place where you are more than capable to work with your thing. And it's not my job to go, if the fence is here and that's your pasture and this is my pasture. It is never. I can feel all I want to feel or perceive or tap into, but it's only ever my job to be, I can own, the closest I can come is right up to that fence. Wow. And be right at that fence with you. You might be in the back 40, you might be 10 feet away.
Yeah.
And we're working in that. But my level of respect and trusting you as a human being is me never crossing this line. And that's where empathy, or being an empath, took a different, like a healthy, healthy and helpful. I don't know what the word would be.
Turn in
place or approach, or just part
of.
It's
a different embodied awareness of how you could still be in awareness of someone's experience, but you could do it with so much more ease because you're not trying to find
and grace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's what I described as kind of like the hypervigilance. I need to see what everyone else is experiencing in the room, and I need to adapt, adjust accordingly so that I'm okay. I feel everything, so I know how to be in the world. And what you're describing is more of I see what's going on for people, and I used to want to go fix it. Like, let me help, let me be of service. And then that shift out of not needing to help, or,
it's a different kind of service.
Exactly. Transformed you into recognizing something else is very possible with the skill you have, but to do it from such a different place. Yeah. And then for me, it's very easy, because I want to throw another mix into this, because I find it so fascinating just to see how we all have similar experiences yet different experiences. And for me, it's really easy for me to tune into people's experiences, especially from a it's not even a felt sense. Like if we think of the clairs, it's like there's just a knowing of what's happening, and then I can also sometimes sense it, I can sometimes taste it, I'll sometimes hear words. I don't really get images. Well, I get images, but it's not a clear image.
Yeah.
But I'll get images of things, but it's more a knowing image. But I only get it if let me rephrase that. I feel it, but I don't pay attention to it unless I'm invited to pay attention to it. And I'm so grateful for that, because it allowed me to keep myself protected and keep myself like at a distance from people. But I think part of that protection is what stopped me from feeling too much. And now I've refined from being so protected and closed off. I've refined my ability to soften into more connection, but without feeling the too muchness unless I'm invited in. So if I'm invited in, like I might get curious calls where we're exploring people's patterns. It's like, well, you've agreed to be on this call, and now game on. I can now tune into your system. And it's been interesting because I've had like at workshops and the Get Curious episodes, even in my programs, I'll have friends signing up and I'm like, oh, now I see you in a very different way, because before I didn't tune into that, even though the information was right there, but I kind of kept myself separate, which part of that I'm now seeing is the protection that I kept myself in. But also I'm grateful for that, because then I didn't have to feel too much. And I'm just in awe on how much information can come through. Like I just think it's so beautiful to be in a way of service to support people in learning more, becoming more conscious of their own experience by me kind of nudging some insights into this or that, because it comes so naturally for me. So to invite people into that deepening allows them to connect more with their human experience, with not just their body, but their soul's experience, what it means to also be spirit, right? Like it's such a rich journey. And yeah, I'm so grateful to be sharing that with you too, to be able to like see all the different, I mean, I say all, but I'm sure we only say a small portion of our experiences of the many different realms of that exist at once. But yeah, to have these types of conversations with you, but then to also know you are doing your work and I don't even like to call it work, but you're supporting people in tuning more into the depth of what's available. And my hopes are like people that do relate to what we're saying, or people that, feel so much and can tune into so much. Like I want to give them hope of like, do your own work so that you can find your own edges, your own ability to recognize what's yours and what's other people's, and what's your own patterns that you find yourself in that then impacts, your own energy, your own way of being in relationship, being in this world. Like the more we do our work, the more we're able to support other people in.
Why does this matter so much to you?
Yeah, good question. For me, I know sometimes I'm like, I wish I was ignorant and knew nothing, because ignorance is bliss. But to me, having this access to more of my experiences is such a rich way of living. Like to be able to open up to the possibility of being so much more than me in this physical form excites me. And because it excites me, I want to invite other people into that same inquiry of like, what is it we're doing here really? Yeah.
Because there is so much more.
There's so much more. Like I feel like we're just starting to take the blinders off a tiny bit. Yeah. So even with this podcast in general, that's one of my main intentions, is how do I invite people to deepen their awareness of their experience of themselves and each other, so that there can be a collective gathering in this newer information we're gaining access to. Yeah. something that you've spoken to me about yesterday, actually, that is still landing, and I'm still need to inquire into this a bit more, but I find it really helpful to become clearer on like what is my philosophy and what is it that excites me, what is it that I'm the clearer I can be in that, the clearer I can be in my language, the clearer I can be in the way I hold space or invite people to inquire, like what is my philosophy. And you asked, you pointed out a few things last night around like, oh, maybe that's not within your philosophy, or that is your philosophy. So do you have a philosophy? Do you have like, what's your philosophy, or what let's weave what values into this too. Like what is, they're slightly different, but I feel like they kind of come together. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Throwing that question
What
at
is
you.
my philosophy? Well, what is my philosophy?
I know it's a big question.
Yeah, no, and I'm thinking like, okay, what's my philosophy with life? What's my philosophy with people? I
don't know, because it's a newer idea for me.
Yeah.
Like to put words or be more conscious of my philosophy is a newer concept for me, or idea, or invitation. So anything you want to kind of weave into that.
I mean, I do believe people have the answers, and with this presence and with this harbor and with my commitment to myself and my own work, and then what that can create and allow, because I can't ask people to go where I haven't gone myself, or so all of that conditions piece, the conditions for what I hope to create when I'm with people, present with people, is definitely part of my approach / philosophy. I've really come to this place, like we've learned all different kinds of frameworks, and listening and what good listening involves and how you listen, and what so much of everything is coming down to for me is how curious am I to seek understanding. Not the knowing, not the telling, not having the answer. I can't possibly know what 43 years or 24 or 67 years, what that weave looks like, feels like, sounds like in this moment that we're meeting each other, whoever it is, and talking.
Yeah.
And so the most gracious and respectful thing I can do is to be as curious as possible, to seek to understand or to create understanding. And so like even last night, the questions, I had my own things in my head going, but that wouldn't have been helpful in what we were talking about. And so that curiosity, that inquiry, that it's like as it's going around and turning lights on inside, so that life of 67 years, the lights that need to go on for them can possibly go on. And the questions that I'm asking based on what they're giving me, it doesn't even matter so much that there's understanding created for me. It's that that my level of curiosity and commitment to being curious helps create understanding, which creates clarity for that person with whatever it is that they're looking at or talking about. I mean, if I today, that would definitely be the fulcrum of my philosophy, that whenever I put myself into the place coming from the basin of creating understanding through curiosity and inquiry, just alive. It's generative. It's the ownership is with the valuing of the other person, owning and realizing and taking and running with their own
deeper knowing.
Really. Their own knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And connection with themselves. And
that's what I'm really hearing in that, is like being in a dynamic. It's not even a dynamic, but being in a field with someone and supporting them in a way where it's them accessing their own knowledge. It's them, like the light bulbs going off. It's like just kind of the curiosity and even the play that I imagine you bring into, I mean, I see you bring it into friendship and life.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's that allows someone else to learn more of their own knowing and their own trust. Like to find the trust within themselves.
Yeah.
Which is something I really value about you as well, is that like the trust that you have in the journey and the trust in your own knowing. And to me, I believe we're all slowly learning to have less control, right? And I find the more we have less control, the more we trust.
Realize that we don't have any control.
Yeah. Even though we try so hard to have control.
Yeah.
But there's something in, at least over the years, that I've seen you like soften in your level of need for control and knowing from more of a cognitive place. And this softening you're doing into the trusting and surrendering into whatever is unfolding. And it's been really cool to witness you in that, because the more you do that, the more it just flows.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring.
That's cool that you see that.
Yeah. And in that, I also see less effort.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And like what comes forward just makes sense, or what falls apart makes sense. Like the unfolding, just makes more sense and seems easier, and you seem softer in that process.
Because my mind, I don't know about anybody else's mind, but the efforting and the figuring limits what's possible.
Yeah. And limits our access to our deeper knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so as I started to develop a relationship with my whole self, like not just my body and my mind, but the intelligence in my heart, the intelligence in my gut, the intelligence that's around me, the intelligence that I can tap into. Like when I'm talking about that a conversation or an interaction with someone and getting curious and really listening and inquiring, it's not just me. Like there is stuff that I have, there's information, there's pulses, there's impulses that come through because I'm that much more open to having whatever all the forces are at play, the matrix, the cosmos, what have you. There's wisdom and intelligence all around us. Like just look out this window.
Yeah.
Like we couldn't create that.
No.
And so that softening that I continue to practice because it goes boom, boom, boom. But with anything, as we keep practicing it, I find I fight this less and less because this is so juicy and rich and raw, and it's not like it becomes easier in the sense of everything's light and fancy free. The depths of feeling is so much more intense and richer, but there's so much more being created and allowed from this practice in this place.
Yeah.
And it goes against everything that I thought I was supposed to do for the first 40 years of my life.
Yeah, that's it.
All those things I was rewarded for and promoted for and paid parented as, and it's a lot for us as human beings to start to question, start to stand up to, start to let go, start to soften into or away from or into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that,
Yeah.
and we have time. It takes time.
Yeah. And the word trust is interesting because sitting here right now, I trust that more than anything that I've experienced to date. I don't trust all that other that I was entangled in.
Yeah.
It's such an entire, complete sense of trust and connection and a deep, deep knowing. Sometimes the surface feels quaky on days or wavy, but when I pause long enough and drop in, the deep, it's like, well, it's all okay. Like
Exactly.
it's deep. There's just this deep, deep sense of being held and taken care of.
Yeah. I can totally
And
relate.
it's not just me. Like
Yeah.
that's in
It's-
the connectedness of the
It's
whole.
in the collective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and to me, it's that difference of like looking outside of myself to know how to be, to know where to be, to know what to do, to know what kind of box to fit into, right? It's this difference of like, again, I'm so disconnected from myself. I look outside of myself to learn how I'm supposed to be in the world. And to me, that's our journey, is to then start to work towards looking inward, and the richness that comes from that is so profound. But for those that don't know it, you don't know it. So if you have no idea what Annalise is talking about, it's like, yeah, it makes sense, because chances are you're still looking outside yourself.
Yeah.
And what I want to invite is for people, like, if you can relate to what Annalise is speaking to, like, notice what that feels like. How can we connect to that on a more regular basis? Because for me, like, the ongoing practice of noticing when I'm connected into what to me feels like more my gut, my heart, the crystalline field, the collective field we're part of. Like, there's a real slowing down that I feel when I'm in that. There's a softening. There's that grace again. There's a sense of interconnectedness. And then when I'm not in that, that's when I notice my protection. That's when I notice defensiveness, like my go-to survival patterns. So what I want to invite people to inquire into is like, how are you navigating being in the world, and how much of you is looking outside for answers? And my hopes is that, like, how can you look more into your own experiences? Because it is an ongoing practice. Yeah. I'm practicing all the time, noticing when I'm in the many layers of survival versus really feeling connected and we're always coherent, but in more conscious coherence, if that's a thing, but in more of my deeper understanding of who I am versus who I think I am. I think that's an invitation I wanted to plant in there. Yeah. I want to speak to one more thing around this trusting piece, because I find it could be helpful for people to inquire more into their relationship with it. And what I'm hearing the two of us describe is, and not to, toot our own horns, but it's like this embodied knowing that we're connecting with, and with that there's more ability to surrender, to having less control, ongoing practice. But before we may have landed here, or what other people might relate to, is how there's the bypassing trusting, Or there's what we just kind of briefly spoke to, of being so caught up in the system and like what I should do, have to, need to do, looking outside myself, disconnected from myself. So I want to just speak to those pieces a little more clearly so that it's invites more curiosity and like, okay, I think I trust, but I'm actually more maybe in what I'm labeling as bypassing. And that's just a general word I'm using here, but it has a certain quality to it because I, as someone who has definitely been in more functional freeze and been in more of the whatever, it'll all work out. Like, that was definitely how I lived my life. And it did, but also many components of it didn't. And I want to invite people to kind of think a little bit on like, what does trust feel like to you? And do you trust yourself? Or is there this universal trust, but you're actually disconnected with yourself and you're kind of waiting for things to unfold as they're supposed to unfold, or as they're meant to unfold, but you're not taking much responsibility of who you are and the actions you take to support the unfolding.
Yeah.
So to me, that quality of trust, the more what I'm calling bypassy, feels more airy. It feels more like floating through life. It looks like floating through life. Like there's not much effort involved. And sometimes it does work out for these people. And maybe I was saying this to you last night, maybe we're working too hard thinking we need to take responsibility and take action in our own ways we move through life. But what I want to invite people into is like, can you relate more to this floatiness or this airiness or this kind of like surrender? It'll all work out. Because that surrender is somewhere we can actually be stuck in the threat response cycle. And it's actually a disconnect from self. And it's just this like, I go like this with my hands up over my head because it does feel like airy, floaty, up in the clouds. Anything you want to add to that? Because I know you can relate to that.
Yeah. I definitely was there. And I wholeheartedly believed that. And
it's like I'm manifesting
when I go there, it's like I gave it all out and away. And I do believe in that there is help. Like there is, the energies are helping things to manifest. I do believe that.
Yes.
But it was all there, more so, or it was efforting and working so hard and forcing. So there were these real polarities that I was living in. The world needed me to do this, but there was some part of me, or the world expected me to live this way, and that's what got rewarded. But there was this other part of me that knew something else, but they were either ors.
Yeah.
And what has happened, what I started to learn and explore, was more of that resourcefulness and that capacity from within, while still being connected to the help that's available to us out there in the cosmos, in the ethers, in the angels, whatever it is that you would term that. I still have a responsibility to be showing up and being present without forcing, which is the old pattern.
Yeah.
To be in co-creation, and
of the two worlds almost, right?
It's now it's an and, it's not the either, it's not an either or. And that I'm actually not separate from that. I actually had a relationship that felt quite separate, and I am of that. So it's all right here now, more so.
Yeah.
And that's been a practice that I've been cultivating through nervous system work and through energy work, and just real just practical noticing, like, oh, I just gave that away. Like, come back into yourself. Like, what's it feeling like in here? And learning to hear not that voice and all those voices that make that up, and not giving it away to this, but like the harmonizing of what my voice sounds like with the wisdom and the intelligence and the connectedness and the knowing.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
It's the integration of like, yes, I'm here in human form and I need to be contributing and doing and in action.
But from a place of choice, not a place of conditioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has a very different quality.
Very different quality.
When we're of that versus when, we're in the shoulds and the have tos and the conditioning and losing total connect. Like the ends of the spectrum are real. Like, so what can you relate to? Those of you listening, it's like, can you relate more to that? Like, I have to work hard. I need to earn my experiences and earn my status and earn whatever my value, or am I in the airy, floaty, it'll all work out, I'll just let it all flow? And then there's a whole spectrum here, and what is the in-between place? And you so beautifully described what the integration of all of it is, where it's like, we want qualities of all of those, but when are they rooted in survival is the way I always describe it, or what I always invite people to pay attention to is when am I veering more into the flavors of survival versus when am I an embodied experience of the integrated versions of all of these. And it's a practice, and it takes work and untangling and healing the layers that make us or draw us into the airy bypass, or have us entangled in the belief that we have to work hard and we have to really be of what the world wants us to be instead of who we are, right? And the more we're able to pause and notice ourselves in these qualities that are more rooted in survival, the more we can also get curious about what is this integrated version that you described so beautifully. And that's what I want to invite people into in this podcast is, we talked about it from a point of empathy, and we talked about it from a point of trust, right? And what is this integrated, more mid-range version of empathy, and what is this mid-range version of trust? And that's part of the journey, is like,
and I don't know if I'd go mid-range, maybe mid-range, because we're coming into the midline, where that's coming from. I'm feeling that as more of the purest essence of me, like with carving away all of those as we work to move, shift, notice, befriend, release, free all of those survival patterns. I'm hearing a completely different chord being struck within me.
I like that.
It's there right now. It's always been there from the moment I was born. You were born, and then all the muffling, or distortion occurs. And
that's beautiful.
I'll just leave that there.
I appreciate that. I like that reframe, because it is the purest version of who we are as a human, where it's not as entangled or fragmented as beautiful. Anything else you want to add? Any resources you have for people? I don't even know if you're taking on clients, anything like that.
Well, I'm always curious. When I started doing this work independently, self-employed, people are like, who's your niche client? You have to have a niche client. Like, is it women? Is it, people in nonprofits? And I'm like, it's the people that want to do the work.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I don't care what you do. Who you be. Who you be is like that shifting from knowing, doing to being. There's an elegance and an eloquence in that journey, in choosing that journey. So it's what gets me up in the morning, and it feels like it's really all that matters. Like, You said it earlier of, like I asked you, why is this important? And to have this human experience be as rich and deep as it possibly can and is meant to be. Wow.
Agreed.
And, I've been asleep, I've avoided, I've been masked, and as soon as I started to see those things for what they were, my life just became so much more enjoyable, and the freedom makes me feel a bit emotional in my heart, actually. Like the freedom to really experience being here completely shifted and continues to shift.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with perfection. I grew up with straight A's. I grew up with always getting it right and being a really good student. So it's hard to shift my frame of, oh, I've got it wrong. Oh, I got it wrong. Versus shifting it from wrong to, I don't have to be like that. I don't have to buy into that. I don't have to hide in that. I don't have to, I get to choose. That awareness allows me choice. And then I practice, which builds the capacity. And the capacity is ultimately the freedom and joy of that I get to continue to explore being me in the world and in service in any way that is making sense with other human beings feeling that for themselves. Helping, just that, like other people seeing themselves. Oh my God, it's the best job in the whole world, if you want to call it a job.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's exactly.
Accompanying into those spaces.
In this profound experience, towards this profound experience that we're all having.
Yeah. That we can have.
Yeah. What comes up to me in that, is there any advice you have for people that are at the beginning of this journey? Where it's like, I'm so deeply conditioned.
Go gently.
Go
gently, go slowly. There's highs and lows. It's kind of like you can have the born again Christian sort of experience. If I think about it for me, because it's really all I can speak to, I would just go more gently. I'd be kinder with myself. I still have to practice that. But I would have been kinder with myself in those earlier days, and the compassion. And that, actually, this is another really big thing, that it's not intended to be done alone.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah,
we're not meant to evolve alone. Because this is what we're talking about, is it is evolving and growth.
Collective evolving.
And it's not meant to be done alone. I have goosebumps right now, so that was a good one. Thank you to have come through. Because that, again, was a way I wasn't kind or supportive of myself that I could have been. So
beautiful. What shows up for me around that question is be aware of your expectations, which matches this be kind, but it's like, pause and notice the expectations you have of yourself, or of what you think you should be doing, or who you should be by now, or how it should look. And of course those expectations are there, but to pause and notice them and just give yourself some space around them. To acknowledge the expectations exist, and we don't know. And to just hold space for expectations, acknowledge they exist, but How can we also remember, like,
I don't like the word should.
Yeah.
And as soon as it comes up, it's a signal and it's a cue that it's conditioning. It's external. Like we're shoulding all over ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that check-in with expectations is whose are these expectations?
Yeah.
And how do I know when they're really my own on myself? And how do we start to register what it feels like when they're free of the conditioning and it's an expectation I'm choosing?
Yeah.
Like how do we start to register the qualities that come with that feeling versus the other, the shoulds?
Well, it's interesting. I ran a workshop the other day with my Discover group. We do a workshop every 4 months. And I ran a workshop around procrastination. And what we did in it is we untangled, or we became more aware of what's involved in our shoulds, because our have-tos, our want-tos. And I didn't include need-tos in there, but you could include need-tos in there. And it was so interesting because some people had no problem with, like, shoulds weren't entangled in stuff. Like, it wasn't entangled with conditioning, or it was more want-tos were. Like, I want to, but I can't. Like, I should, there was this. So it was like, it's not just shoulds, but we can have this conditioning around, like, I want to, but I can't, I want to be this person in the world, but it's not okay to. So to notice that it's not just shoulds and that it's have-tos. Like for me, have-tos is a big one. I have a lot of entanglement with, like, I have to do this stuff, and then it's just so much stuff that I don't do any of it, right? It's less of a should.
You're just fully overextended and then you're frozen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe one day I'll run a workshop on it, but I find that quite interesting because, yes, shoulds, but I just want to also add have-tos, want-tos, and probably need-tos is another branch as well that can be explored of, like, what do we actually have entangled or kind of is in.
Well, yeah, and I mean from needs is almost the closest we get to the purest form of what it actually is. When we can identify what our need is, it's not a position, it just is. Where a want can be a position. Should is coming externally.
Not necessarily, though. If I think of a need, for example, it's possible that my needs aren't okay. So then...
Your needs aren't okay?
Yeah, so I have a need, but it's, let's say, early developmentally, my needs weren't okay, so I had to dampen all my needs. So now I don't even know what my needs are, right? So it depends on our relationship to needs. So yes.
Yeah, we're talking, I think it's different things, like like a want often is about a position. I'm holding a position because I want something to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas a need is at the base of the hierarchy that wasn't met or that we're not allowed. Like that's all true and can have happened. But when we can identify what that need is, we can work with the need. There's
the first part is being able to identify it.
Exactly.
So if there's things entangled with your needs, then identifying them is going to be harder.
Absolutely.
But once it's identified, then there can be more.
There's clarity. There's something tangible to work with.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. And there can be requests made on how to make that need met in a tangible way. Whether that's
Yeah.
But first, the need has to be acknowledged, and that might not be available for those that as someone who everything's fine, me getting more in touch with my needs is newer to me.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to name that. Right? Because, like, if I'm always fine, then I don't have needs, and then I don't have anything I don't need anything tangible because it's all good. So it's, to again just notice, like, where do we have there's an episode I talk about overcoupling and undercoupling is the SE, somatic experiencing language around it,
right? Or
another word I'll use is like things are entangled, or there's things that are missing. So for me, the needs, there's a missing awareness of my needs, right? Whereas someone else might be, it might be that your needs are too much. That's the over coupling, the entanglement. And just to identify, needs are too much, so that it's hard for me to identify needs. Or for me, it's not that my needs were too much. It was just, I was modeled, everything is fine. But there isn't any.
Don't even know what a need
Don't
is.
even need a need, right?
Don't even need a need. What's a need?
What's a need? So it's like being able to identify your relationship with needs, your relationship with have tos, want tos, shoulds. Like there's so many layers that we can untangle in those pieces that it's, I don't know. It was a workshop that I did, and I had so many ahas in it. I was like, I need to really sit with all of this a little bit more. And it's funny because in the workshop, I didn't even bring needs into it. It was shoulds, have tos, and want tos. And then upon reflection, I was like, I didn't talk about like what we might need. So again, because it's not in my awareness. Yeah. So
that's cool.
Yeah. Again, the ongoing learning, the ongoing exploration.
And the ongoing freedom, the ongoing capacity, the ongoing growth.
Evolution. This to me, like, we are on a path of evolution. And we have been, if we look at our history.
Species.
Exactly. It's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
It excites me so much.
Yeah.
So thank you for diving into these conversations with me.
Easy.
Yeah,
right? What am I going to talk about on the podcast?
So much.
Lovely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I love you. Much appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah. So much.
You're doing so much good in the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Me too. And it's an honor to walk alongside you with that because we do it in such different ways. Yeah. It's a good way for me to expand my perception of what's possible, because I feel like we move through the world so differently but also so similarly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope that this episode has provided you with new perspectives and insights. And if you haven't already, head to my website to download the experiential guide. Until the next time, I invite you to continue to pause and notice.